Hi, I'm Lilia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Building a Better You. Now, today we're going to be reading from the book of Matthew. We're going to be reading from various chapters and various verses, but they all come together for our story today. And our lesson today is having peace and joy in our lives. How do you do that? Well, that's what we're going to study today, because we're going to go back and read these chapters and these verses and see how those same solutions that were used then can still be used today. And we're going to look at some of the things that happened back to Jesus in his day, because this all stems around stress and anxiety. How do you get peace in hard times? And sometimes, as difficult as it can seem, no matter what the situation is, there's always a way that we can have peace and joy in our lives, even in hard times, even in difficult times. And sometimes we find ourselves stressing over things that really aren't that important. But they are, because we constantly think about them. The more we think about them, the more we stress. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want peace. It's not difficult if you follow these directions. First of all, let's talk about some of the things that give us stress. Let's say somebody said something negative about you or your family, and they might have said it to you or maybe even behind your back, and it got back to you, and now you're worried about it. You're stressing over that because nobody likes to be talked about negatively. So now you're thinking about it and wondering why they said it and what did I do to them. It may be somebody you don't even know, but yet you're still stressing about it. Now it's 2 days later, and I don't know, they've gone on about their business. They forgot they even said it, and it's still bothering you. That's stress. And another example is peer pressure. And this is a lot for young people, older people too, but mostly younger people. And we see that more and more on our news every single day. The carjackers, the one who robbed the dollar store, who robbed the corner store. I mean, these people are getting younger and younger. The ages are ranging from 14, 15, 16. What are they doing out? Why did they get a gun? Why are they even there? The point I'm making is, you may have friends, this is where the peer pressure comes in, and they say, well, we're going to try to rob that corner store because we know nobody's going to be in there after this hour. All we have to do is just go in and grab the money out the cash register and run out. And you're like, no, I don't think I want to do that. I can't do that. And they kind of pressure you to, oh, come on, nobody's going to get hurt. I'll tell you what, you stand at the door and you watch. So you go along with the program. Now you're in the clique, you're in the group, you're going to go have fun and take the money. And so you get to the store, and you're standing at the door. You're the lookout. I'm not doing nothing. I'll just look out. You just stand there. We'll be right back. So they get to the counter, and they, try to hold up the clerk, and the clerk, suppose the clerk has a gun of his own. Now there's a shootout. They shoot the clerk. Now you're all running out the store. You're running with them. You all get caught. And guess what? You all get charged. Because any felony, if you're there, whether you're inside, outside, in the car, doesn't matter. If it's a felony charge, you're getting the same punishment. And you're thinking, well, I didn't do nothing but stand at the door. But you didn't try to stop it. And you knew it was wrong when you went there because you knew what they went there to do. But young people don't think about that. All they want to do is run with the crowd, be a part of the crowd. And that's where the peer pressure comes in. Next, there's parental pressure. A lot of young people have pressure from their parents, and the parents mean well. They figure, well, you've got an opportunity that I never had, and you can go to college and be this, that, and the other. Well, if the parent is already a professional, they feel that the child should be a professional as well. So now they're telling them, well, you go to this college and you can get in here, and then you can make that kind of money, and you could be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever they were. Or they're trying to get the child to do what they, as a parent, didn't have the opportunity to do. Now they want the child to fulfill what they couldn't. And that puts pressure on the child because they want to please the parent. So parents, you got to take heed. Talk to your kids. Ask them what they have in mind. You've got to talk with them and find out where their heart is. And then after the parental pressure, there's somebody, the friend. Well, come on and do this with me, or let's go do this, and you don't want to do it. And they say, well, I thought you were supposed to be my friend. I thought we were best friends. There you go. They're pressuring you again. And then there's fear and there's guilt. Maybe there's something in your past that you feel guilty still about. Maybe you can't discuss it. Maybe it's something that happened to you or something that you did to somebody. And all these things cause us to have no sleep, poor sleep, and poor health. Poor sleep and poor health can stem from any type of stress. So the whole point I'm making in today's lesson is what to do. How do we handle it? No matter what the situation is, the solution is always going to be the same. Now I'm going to tell you four things that Jesus did to manage to have peace in his life. And you know, Jesus had a stressful life. And we're going to talk about some of his stresses and his solutions. And the four things that he did, the first thing he did was to pray. He prayed all the time. The second thing he did was to trust in God. The third thing he did was he knew when to be quiet. And the fourth thing he did was he always forgave. So let's go back and look at what Jesus did. Now, he had his whole adult life was stress for him. And so were many of the people that he interacted with. So first we're going to look at his own stressful personal stresses. So let's start back when he first came and started his preaching and his teachings, and not many people were listening to him because they just thought it was another prophet. But once he began to do his miracles, now they started to pay attention. Now they started to listen to him. Then they began to ask, do you think he's the Son of God? Why? Because now they saw him making the blind to see, making the lame to walk, making the dumb to talk, casting out devils, curing the sick, and the diseased who had palsy and leprosy. And once they saw these things, they were amazed and awed. Now they believed and they thought, he must be the Son of God. And the more he taught, the more followers there became. And the multitudes grew into thousands of people. But you know what? That's when his troubles really began. Because all this time, the Pharisees were hearing what the people were saying. But, they didn't really believe it. until they actually started following the people to see where they were going. And they saw him do these miracles with their own eyes. With their own eyes. So let's go to Matthew chapter 12. And we're going to start in verse 22. We're only going to read a couple of verses, and then we're going to talk about that. Now, it says, in 22, it says, "Then was brought unto him," unto Jesus, "one who was possessed with a devil, blind and dumb. And he healed them, insomuch that the blind and the dumb both spake and saw. And all the people were amazed, and they said, Is not this the son of David? But when the Pharisees heard it, then they said, Oh, this fellow, he doesn't cast out devils, except by Beelzebub, the prince of the devils." Now the Pharisees saw for themselves. Now they hated him even more, and they wanted to claim him to be a fake and a fraud and a blasphemer. Now they began to plot against him on how to kill him, because the people now were turning to him, believing in him instead of them. Now let's talk about more stress for Jesus. That's the Pharisees stressing him. Let's talk about his own people who stressed him. We're going to talk about some of Jesus' betrayals by his own people. Let's talk about Judas Iscariot. Now, once Judas found out that the priests were looking for Jesus, they told him, "We just want to talk to him. We need to talk to him and understand what he's saying and why he's saying this." But Judas Iscariot had ulterior motives. Because Judas went to the high priest and he asked him, he said, "Well, what will you give me if I turn you over to him, if I turn him over to you?" And they decided on 30 pieces of silver. And he gave Jesus up for 30 pieces of silver. And he led them to Gethsemane, where Jesus was in the garden praying. That was a real betrayal. And then there was Peter. Now, Peter was supposed to be one of his main people. And Peter denied him 3 times in one day. 3 times. 3 different people asked Peter, "Well, didn't we see you in Nazareth with Jesus?" And all 3 times he said, "I do not know the man." 3 different times, 3 different people, and 3 times he denied that he even knew Jesus. But after the 3rd time, what happened? The cock crowed. And then Peter remembered. Jesus told him at the Last Supper, he told Peter, he said, "Before the cock crows thrice, 3 times, you will betray me." Now Peter remembered the words of Jesus. And he felt so distraught because he had failed him and betrayed him. And he went away sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. He wept bitterly because he had betrayed Jesus, and Jesus had already forewarned him that that would happen. And the last one I want to tell you about is Thomas. Now, Thomas was a good disciple, but he was a doubtful person. He always had the negative side of stuff. If you said one thing, he would say, "Well, yeah, but this, and what about that?" And that's where he got the nickname of Doubting Thomas. And he did. He really betrayed Jesus when once Jesus came back from being resurrected, Thomas did not believe it was him. And they kept saying, "But it's our Lord, it's our Master." And Thomas kept doubting, "No, that's not him." He didn't believe until what? Jesus had to hold up both his hands before Thomas's eyes to let him see the nail holes in his hands before Thomas believed that it was him, before Thomas believed that he was resurrected. How do you think Jesus felt in all these instances? Betrayed by 3 of his own, having the Pharisees coming down on him, claiming him a fraud. That in itself was stress. His whole adult life was one stressful thing after another. But no matter what, the very first thing that Jesus always did in any of his situations was pray. And the next thing he always did was to trust and turn everything over to God. He always said, Father, not my will, but thy will be done. And that's what we have to learn to do. That's what we have to learn, to trust, pray, and then leave it up to the Lord. Now let's take a look at some of the people that Jesus was involved with that actually trusted and believed in him, because they had faith in everything he said and he did. And now we're going to read from Matthew chapter 15. We're going to go to 15. And in chapter 15, we're only going to read from verse 21 through 28. And this is under the title of the faith of a Canaanite woman. So let's start in 21, and we're going to read and come back and discuss. And it says, Then Jesus went to the coast of Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. But look at this. He answered her not a word. He never responded. And his disciples came and they said, Send her away. She's crying after us. But he said to them, I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But then she still came and she worshipped him. And she said, Lord, help me, help me. And he answered and he said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. And she said, Yes, that's true, Lord. But even the dogs eat the crumbs from their master's table. And Jesus said, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Now let's back up and see what that meant. First of all, it says he came into Sidon. Now that's a Canaan place. And a Canaan woman came, and she was the one that was crying out to him. And she was saying that, Have mercy on me, Lord. My daughter is vexed. She's grievously vexed with the devil. And vexed means she's distressed. She's distressed. But he didn't even respond. He didn't say a word. Remember we said he knew when to be quiet? That was one of the 4 things that gave him peace. He said not a word to her. But when his disciples said, Send her away, she's calling after us, what did he say to them? He said, Well, I wasn't sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that simply meant that I wasn't sent here for the Canaanite children. I was sent here for the children of Israel, not for the Canaanite children. But she kept following him, and she kept worshiping him, and she kept saying, Lord, help me. And that's when he made that strange remark to her when he said, "It is not meet to take the children's bread." And meat means, in this context, it meant it wasn't proper. And the bread meant the healing. So he was telling her, I didn't come here to heal the Canaanite children. I came here to heal the Israelite children. And then he made that analogy. I can't take the bread, the healing from the Israelite children. And how did he say it? And cast it to the dogs. That means and give it to somebody else. But she knew, she had faith in him anyway. And she said, "Oh, that's true, Lord. You don't give the bread from your children to the dogs." But that's when she said, "But even the dogs have the crumbs from their master's table." And that amazed Jesus, because that meant no matter what you give me, even if you give me crumbs, I'm going to take that. So if you give me the crumbs from your bread, that'll give me a little bit of healing for my daughter. Because the crumbs have the same ingredients as the bread. So if you would be willing to throw your dog the crumbs, I'll be the dog. Throw me your crumbs, Lord. Whatever you give, I will accept. And he was amazed. And that's when he said, "O woman, great is thy faith." And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Faith. Faith because she trusted him, she believed in him without even seeing him heal her daughter. She just knew he could. And whatever he threw her way, she knew it would be a help to her. Now let's go down to chapter 17 more quickly. And we're going to read from verses 14 to 18. And let's see what that says, because that also has a connotation. I can't get the pages separated. Okay, chapter 17, and we're going to go verse 14 through 18. And this is under a demonic boy who was healed. So let's go to 14:17. And when they had come to the multitude, there came a certain man, kneeling down unto him, to Jesus, and saying, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is lunatic and sore vexed. For oft time he falleth into the fire and even into the water. I brought him to the disciples, but they couldn't heal him." And Jesus said, "Bring him on. Bring him to me." And Jesus rebuked the devil. He rebuked him. He rebuked the devil, and the devil departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. And when the disciples said to Jesus later, they asked him, he said, "Well, why couldn't we heal him when he asked us?" Because you see, he did ask the disciples first, but they couldn't cure him. And they asked Jesus, "Why couldn't we cure him?" And he said, "Because of your unbelief. If you had had as much faith as a grain of mustard seed, nothing would have been impossible for you." Nothing would have been impossible. So even his own disciples didn't have the full faith that they needed to heal that man's son. And these solutions, these are the same solutions that are true for today. These are the same solutions that we can use. What did we say? Pray. Praying daily. Having a conversation with God on a daily basis. Throughout the day. Be thankful. And trust. You've got to learn to trust. To read his word. To say I believe his word, that's one thing. But to trust him to do and then learn to accept his decisions. It's always important to learn to accept God's decisions. Even though you may not get it, you don't understand it, don't question God, you can't question God. Just know that whatever he does is always for our good. There is nothing that God would ever do or not do that isn't for our benefit. And trusting in God is the main thing that we have to learn to do to grow our faith. Think back to something God did for you, a situation where you got out of that you didn't even know how you did. That was God. That wasn't luck. And know when to be quiet. You don't always have to respond to everything. Everything somebody says to you doesn't require a response. And that's especially when you're angry or upset. Because that's the time you always say something you don't mean to say, or you're mad and you're angry, and then it's out, and once it's out, you can't get it back. Now they're trying to apologize, you're upset, they're upset, they want to apologize, they want you to apologize, or maybe you want them to apologize to you. But you've got to know when to be quiet. Because sometimes you say things and they're very hurtful, and you can't bring them back. Once the words are out, it's done. There is no restitution for words. So you've got to be careful. Think before you speak. They always tell you that. And I always say, when in doubt, don't. Just keep your mouth shut. If you don't know what to do, do nothing. Wait on the Lord. That's telling you to wait. If you're thinking, I don't know what to do now, that automatically should tell you, then sit and wait. Pray about it and wait. All it takes is to be quiet. Be quiet and listen for a word from God. He really does answer prayers. And finally, learn to forgive. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things we have have a problem with. Trying to forgive somebody. Even saying, I forgive you. Even after all Jesus was through. Even after all the betrayal. All the deceit, no matter what, even hanging from the cross. What were his final words? His final words were, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was forgiving through all his stress, even his death. Learning to forgive is an awesome thing, both for the forgiver and for the one being forgiven. Not only does it make your waking hours more peaceful, but it also helps you sleep, and that's what you need. You need sleep, you need rest, and this is one way you can get it. So try to learn how to follow the 4 things that Jesus did to manage to have peace in his life. To pray, to trust God, know when to be quiet, and always forgive. Could you be that forgiving? And my closing words for today are, never maximize your opposition, and by all means, never minimize your God. Until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.